right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about one that was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and it did not disappoint. It is insane, and it was a lot of fun to talk about. We were talking about Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse, starring Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe as a pair of wickies that are stuck on a island in a lighthouse, slowly going mad. And I guess slowly is not the right word because they are quickly going mad. This movie goes from crazy to just crazier immediately. And it is very unique. And it was a lot of fun to talk about with returning co-host B. Garner. So before we get into the conversation, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. You could also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about on the show. And I want to get into this one. We got a long conversation. This is a movie that is open to lots of interpretation, and we had a lot to say about it. So it's a pretty long one. So let's just jump right into it. This is The Lighthouse. All right, so with us today, we have B joining us again to do another Robert Pattinson-centric episode. This is going to be hopefully a thing going forward, I imagine. B, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well, thank you. Thanks for having me join you again. I mean, yeah, I feel like I'm gonna have to be here when it comes to the Batman film.
Ooh, yeah, that's going to be such a different movie, I'd imagine. But I mean, we will see once it comes. Maybe it will be a weird, crazy movie filled with Robert Pattinson and lots of bodily fluids and functions and things. But I mean, who knows? I guess we'll find out when.
Well,
when it comes.
he did say that apparently he mimics Dafoe's voice when he's playing the role as the Batman. So, yeah, there might be a little tie-in with the Lighthouse going on there.
I'm in 100%. Well, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'll just say that right up front, even though I was not the biggest fan of The Witch. I appreciated The Witch and just that level of attention to detail and production design and everything, but I wasn't huge on the actual story being told, and I felt it was slow in a way that I just really didn't quite connect with, even though I liked the movie. But this is a very different movie, even though it shares some aspects with Robert Eggers' previous work.
Yeah, I've watched The Witch with my partner and my sister, and they both hated the film so much. And I love it. I really think it's amazing. I love like the mood and the atmosphere of that happens, and for me it's really, really scary and quite disturbing, but they were just like, what, why is there a goat? And then yeah. But
well, the goat does rule, but
yeah, the goat does rule, but the seagull is, in The Lighthouse, is now becoming my favorite. Like,
oh my God, yeah, I love the seagull, and we'll get into it. Well, I think we're gonna probably have a lot to talk about with this one. So why don't we just jump right into some puzzle pieces? What do you got for your first one for The Lighthouse?
Okay, so I'm going with Ingmar Bergman's The Hour of the Wolf.
Okay.
I don't know whether you've heard of this movie at all.
I think I've heard of it, but I've certainly never seen it. And I will say right before you get into your explanations, this is exactly why I was hoping to have you on the show, because I knew you would know these movies that my film vocabulary doesn't quite stretch back to some of this stuff. And clearly these kind of things are inspirations for someone like Robert Eggers. And so I'm glad to have you here to talk about stuff like this that I definitely have not seen.
Well, it's good because I finally make use of my film studies degree. So,
Right.
and my careers counselor said I would never amount to anything. So, Anyway, so the Hour of the Wolf is from 1968, and it tells the story of a troubled artist played by Bergman sort of regular Max von Sydow, who goes to a remote island. So there we go. We've got the connection between remote islands and the lighthouse.
Sure.
Um, and on this island, he goes mad, as you do. I feel like anyone who goes on an island is not going to have a good time unless it's like a tropical island, maybe.
It sure seems that way, yeah.
Yeah. And this film is so surreal and crazy. Basically, he has a wife who's played by Liv Ullmann, another Bergman regular, and she is trying to keep everything afloat.
Hmm.
He's going completely crazy. He starts saying that he's seeing people. Um, he tells us of this weird story, which may or may not be true, about killing a young boy,
Mm.
which is very warped and quite shot in such a in silence. And while watching The Lighthouse, and when Rob Pattinson's character is telling about what happened and why he's ended up on, in the going to be on this remote island. He's on the run, and
Hmm.
the possibly he's murdered someone. Although it's hard to tell what's real and what's not, and
Right.
that's what is the same with the Hour of the Wolf. It's this idea of what is real and what's fantasy, and the blurring of the lines. And the film is shot in typical Bergman fashion. So there's high angles and low angle shots. Everyone looks like slightly distorted and
Hmm.
disfigured in some sort of way, and tight camera shots. And there's this wonderful scene where they're they go to this dinner, because there's some people who are living on this island, and they invite the artist and his wife to have dinner, and the camera keeps spinning around the table, and it makes it really dizzy. And then there's just quick jump cuts to each person talking, but they're talking over each other, and
Mm.
it's playing around with sound and this layering of sound and dialogue. And I feel like that's definitely what Eggers is referencing throughout
Sure.
The Lighthouse is Bergman and his, especially that one film. It's yeah, it's a really really weird film, and I if you're going to go into Bergman's filmography, it's probably not the best one to start with, because not all of his films are like that. But yeah, that's definitely one of the ones that is his most psychological horror.
Right.
Uh, Even though not there isn't really that much horror in it. It's more to do with the mood and the atmosphere and keeping people on the edge, waiting for something. This feeling of dread, which I think,
And then that's just like The
yeah,
Lighthouse, which
exactly.
it's not really horror, even though it's inevitably going to be kind of pigeonholed into that horror genre. But it's really not a horror movie. I mean, it's more of just like this psychological
Mm,
just descent into madness, which certainly is a sister to the horror genre, but horror isn't exactly it. And the way you're describing some of what Bergman was doing in The Hour of the Wolf, I mean, definitely. I actually was just listening to an interview with Robert Eggers, and he was talking about the camera movements and how they help to bring the audience into that state of mind of the deterioration that
mm.
Robert Pattinson's character is going through. And yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's not really a descent into madness, because they're mad anyway. Like the moment
Right.
they get there, they're already
Yeah.
mad. That wonderful moment where they just look at the camera just before they go inside, and they're just like, okay, they're crazy. That
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, great first puzzle piece. I really enjoyed that, hearing about the use of all of those kind of things to help tell the story and help sell that craziness there. I'm gonna go for my first one. Well, another descent into madness kind of movie, and that is of course Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Oh.
And of course, with The Shining, you also get a main character who is in a remote location with the intention of doing work and upkeep on the place while he's there, and of course he's doing his own writing as well. But still, he's there for somewhat similar reasons to Robert Pattinson in the Lighthouse, coming to this remote location, and then everything from that point forward, just going from just crazy to worse to worse to worse, and of course also not really knowing what is real. By the end of the movie, it is pretty clear that there's almost nothing that you can definitively say happened or didn't happen. It's all kind of open to interpretation.
Yeah, the same with the Lighthouse. I mean, you can have
Yep.
so many different readings, and I mean, have you seen the Shining documentary, Room 237?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I kind of want a documentary to go along with the Lighthouse, which
Oh, I'd love
has
it.
everybody sort of like giving out their theories. I don't think it's about the moon landing, so
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, that wouldn't work with this one necessarily, but there's plenty of theories to go around, I'm sure.
yeah, and like you were saying about The Shining, this idea of what is real and what's not, and sort of blending together. And I think what Stanley Kubrick does with that film is create that sense of dread right from the very opening. You know, when he's having that uncomfortable meeting, that interview, and you can already see he's mad just
Yeah.
by
Yeah, he's not showcasing anything yet, but you just can tell there's just something off here.
yeah, and it's very unsettling. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just thinking of a double bill between the Lighthouse and The Shining. You'd just be complete,
Oh boy.
like by the end of it, wow, you'll be questioning
Oh
your
yeah.
sanity.
Oh yeah. And also I guess now that I think about it, the Egger's production design that he puts into his movies, I mean, it's just impeccable. I mean, you just the locations are so I mean, I imagine so true to life, so just thought out, in such a way. It's just it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, he really sort of, you can get the sense that he's a perfectionist, just like Kubrick was.
Exactly.
I mean, look,
Exactly.
you just have to look at the level of attention to the language in
Mm,
both The Witch and The Lighthouse, you know? I mean, that the research that's gone into recreating that time period, even though it kind of feels like those films don't exist outside of time.
sure. Sure.
So, but
Yeah, speaking of that language, before moving on to another puzzle piece, I would love, I'm going to see this again in the theater for sure. This is a movie that needs a second viewing, but I am very much looking forward to watching it at home with subtitles once it comes out, because there
yeah.
is must be so much I missed the first time through.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking the same. Like, there's just, especially when Dafoe gives his long monologues,
Oh,
and he's just
so good.
rambling on.
So damn good. He is just incredible. He delivers those with, I mean, and I mean, it should come as no surprise. He's truly like one of the greats, and and so it really shouldn't be a surprise. But I mean, he is so good in this.
So, so good. Yeah, I will give another puzzle piece if
Go
that's
for
okay.
it.
I'm sticking with Bergman for a while.
Hmm.
It's not all going to be Bergman films. I mean, although I could easily do that. Uh, this is Persona is my next film, which is from 1966, and is probably one of Bergman's most well-known films. Uh, I guess Wild Strawberries is another film that could, be a puzzle piece as well. But Persona is again captures the themes of isolation. We have two main characters, pretty much who are only the only characters in the film. There are other characters, but you never really focus on them.
Mm,
And the film follows a woman who's a nurse called Alma, who's put in charge of looking after this actress called Elizabeth, who is refusing to talk. And eventually, they decide to go to this isolated cottage in order to sort of for Elizabeth to rest and recover. And it's at this cottage that their relationship becomes more developed, and Alma starts confessing to Elizabeth, who doesn't talk back to her, all of these secrets, like a secret, kind of like an affair that she had,
mm,
and all these confessions that she gives. And the two women almost become one. They start merging into each other, and
mm.
then you start questioning reality. You know, is one of them even real? Are they even
Sure.
the same person? And I think that's what happens here with the lighthouse to some extent. You start wondering whether could it be that Defoe's character's not even there? Is
Mm-hmm.
it just Robert Pattinson on this island, and is he going crazy and imagining? I mean, he's going crazy, we know that, but is he imagining a second person being there, or is it the other way round? Is Defoe alone and
Absolutely.
imagining this other person there? And that's what I think is really interesting, is this idea of people when they're together and they start syncing up with each other, and you know like how couples start dressing the same.
Sure, sure.
But they almost become like the same person. They start finishing each other's sentences, and they start uh, copying their mannerisms. And I think as well the what's interesting about Persona is it's very surreal, and it's not a psychological horror like The Hour of the Wolf is. It's
Mm.
more of experimental film. There's not really a story there, and that's kind of what happens with The Lighthouse. There isn't really. I mean, what is the plot? It's really hard to
Sure.
define. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a film which is experimental, and um, a sort of piece of reflection and personality. And yeah, it's yeah. If you're gonna start with Bergman, that's where you start.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, and that kind of lack of plot is a little bit of what keeps this from being like probably my favorite movie of the year. It brings it down a couple of notches, but yeah, I mean, I love that idea of being able to sink into theories of what's real, what's not. Are these characters real? What is happening here? And that's just it's funny that we previously also got together to talk about Under the Silver Lake,
Right.
another movie which from this year that was just theories upon what is real and what is not real. And yeah, I mean we're covering some crazy movies, the two of us.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it seems to be like our thing, isn't it? Yeah. What's
it
next?
sure does.
Gosh, I don't know.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Well, I'll go with another one. And it is another movie with incredible cinematography and then just a couple of incredible performances and just set the camera up and just watch them go. It is There Will Be Blood,
Oh.
and and I just I that's I to this day one of I think the most beautiful movies of this decade as far as cinematography is
Mhm.
concerned, and just watching Daniel Day Lewis just go insane, and watching Paul Dano keep up with him completely. I think Paul Dano is incredible in it. Most people do not talk about how good he is in it. And it's just one of those kind of movies where it's just you just watch in awe, of just these two people at the top of their game, just going for it with these huge performances, and being captured in such a beautiful way, even though what's happening is so dark and kind of disturbing along the way.
Yeah, and again, the idea of recreating a time. period as
Mm-hmm.
well, and the level of detail and attention
Yes.
paid. I mean, oh, it's it's crazy to think that it wasn't. It, it was all made. Recreated. It feels so real.
So
Uh,
real, and it's hard to tell with the Lighthouse, especially. I mean, There Will Be Blood's a little more clear, but with the Lighthouse, exactly what that period is.
mm,
Like, it's not one that I think most of us are. Maybe if you're a big history buff or something, but what is this period like? And of course, I've read that it's kind of 19th century, like and like the exact settings and stuff like that, but it's not immediately discernible exactly what the period is to me.
yeah, yeah. It's like that's what's kind of weird about it is that you can. It doesn't feel like it's in any time at all. It
Hmm.
just has this weird sort of out of time, like out of body experience. It's so
Yeah.
hard to describe it. I can't
It's
really.
that fable element that really kind
Yeah,
of throws it for a loop. Because
yeah.
then you're like, wow, all bets are off, kind of. But all right, well, what do you got for your next one?
Okay, so I've got a double bill. Uh, I'm going with David Lynch, and I'm going with Eraserhead and Mulholland Drive.
Hmm.
I have like this weird thing about black and white movies. I love black and white film.
Hmm.
I really, really do. And Eraserhead is so gorgeous to look at, even though it's quite disturbing. And it's the
Hmm.
same with The Lighthouse, this idea of uh, beauty in the horror. Uh,
Sure.
the images that we're seeing on screen are so horrific. I mean, we see the poor seagull. Um,
Oh boy.
that scene is just so like messed up, and there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in the lighthouse, just tentacles and monstrous mermaids and stuff. And you kind of get that with Eraserhead is, this when Henry has his baby and it's this weird lizard creature. I mean,
Hmm.
have you seen Eraserhead?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a wild film, and
Crazy.
the chicken that bleeds when they carve it, and it the whole film is so messed up. Uh, and again, this idea of isolation and descending into madness.
Hmm.
And also with Mulholland Drive, the kind of like persona, the pairing of two characters, and whether they almost start to blend into one person, and this surreal mystery around it, because there's a mystery with the lighthouse is what happened to cause these two men to take on this role, and
Sure.
what they're running away from.
Why they
Uh,
spilled their beans.
yeah. Oh god. I love that. There's so many quotable lines as well. It's amazing. Just like all the lines that there is in the lighthouse that are just so funny. Uh,
Speaking of that line, I liked that a lot of the times in A24 film trailers, we get that repeated line building like a crescendo through the trailer, but it doesn't always happen like that in the movie. This is one time where they actually did have the "Why'd you spill your beans" repeating through the actual movie during that one scene,
yeah.
which I kind of liked. It was like almost like an A24 fan service.
Yeah, I they and they've got a thing coming out which is the shaving gift that you can buy, the beard oil. And
Oh, nice.
and it comes with a mermaid as well, like the mermaid sculpture. So I love like their marketing team is amazing. Like hats off to
And
them. They do so well.
anyone listening right now, I will definitely take that as a Hanukkah gift.
I'll take it as well. I mean,
There you go.
I don't have a beard, but
It'll look good on the shelf.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, absolutely great, great puzzle pieces there. I mean, that the black and white kind of thing definitely sells that with like Eraserhead, and like it's just, yeah. I mean, it's such a cool looking thing. This movie, The Lighthouse. I mean, it just everything just looks so freaking beautiful, and then of course the aspect ratio also just adds to that. And I mean, it really just kind of adds to that feeling of being stuck on that crazy freaking island. Actually, to that point, also, as total aside, before I go to my next puzzle piece, but it reminded me so much of the last time, I think it was called Point Arena Lighthouse in Northern California. We went to on a trip a couple of years ago. It looked exactly like that, the top of the lighthouse, like the steps leading up, and it's like it's just I remember being in that lighthouse and thinking like this is crazy, like that people would actually have been in here like doing work, like it must have been insane, and now I get to kind of see that.
Oh yeah, you're gonna love my next puzzle piece. So
Oh, okay. Right on. Well, I am gonna go for my next one. Well, you just doubled up on that one, so I'll go with a couple that went together. This is more specific to the ending and the specific scene of when Robert Pattinson finally sees the light, and it just absolutely destroys him. Spoiler alert, of course, but that's how that's how this show goes. But it reminded me a little bit of Raiders of the Lost Ark, as
Oh
well as
yeah.
the Last Crusade. But with that finally seeing, or Last Crusade, drinking from the cup, but and just it just completely just demolishes the character. I mean, in just such a cool, insane way, and I gotta say, when he started like screaming in that just distorted audio, and like I mean, I was just like I was almost giddy while I was watching that. I was like, this is crazy. I love this. That is balls to the wall filmmaking right there, I think.
Yeah, and you do you almost expect his face to start melting.
Yeah.
Like, oh, his head to explode or something.
Seriously, it was it's a crazy ending. I love that so much. I thought it was so cool.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Right on. What do you got next?
Yeah, okay. So, right, do you want some story time? You like stories? Do you like urban
I
legends?
I'm down. I'm
Okay.
down.
All right. So, bear with me with this one. And
Okay.
so I know this is not a film related puzzle piece, but there has been a film based on this.
Hmm.
So I will tell you the urban legend of the Flannan Isle Lighthouse mystery.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, so there's some islands off the coast of Scotland, really, really, really remote. They're called the Flannan Isles, and back in the 26th of December 1900, um, a, a ship went to this island after reports of that the lighthouse looked to be unmanned. And this was quite a important lighthouse where it was positioned. There were quite a lot of rocks, and so this lighthouse needed to be lit. Um, it had to be. It was otherwise you would have ships being destroyed and um, sinking. So um, they sent a boat to go and have a look, and the boat also had a replacement lighthouse keeper on there. So they can swap out the lighthouse keepers. There were
Hmm.
on this island before. I feel like at the only a few weeks before there had been 3 men assigned to man the lighthouse. And when they got to, when Captain James Harvey arrived on the island with the replacement lighthouse keeper called Joseph Moore, they found no one to greet them, which was weird.
Hmm.
They were obviously blaring their horns, saying, "Hello, here we are," and you would expect someone to meet them. they went up to the house. The house was locked. The cottage was locked. They managed to get inside, and it was completely empty.
Hmm.
So the only thing that they found was an overturned chair, and two of the overcoats were missing from the hooks. The third one was still hanging up. They found that a fire had been lit, but the men's beds were still unmade. So whatever happened to them, this must have happened to them in quite a quick, sudden, you know, something happened to them for them to suddenly just leave the house.
Sure.
Nobody,
Yeah.
and they were looking at the journals, the logs, and they were talking about a giant storm that was raging above them. In the journal, it said that one of the men was crying, the other one was completely silent, not talking, and then the storm passed. And the final entry in the log was storm ended, sea calm, God is over all.
Mm.
And to this day, they don't know where the men went. So there wasn't any way they could get off the island. They theorized that maybe there was a big wave that swept them off, but their bodies were never found. And they say, well, we don't know why they would go out in such, if there was a storm, why they would even go outside,
Hmm.
unless one of the men needed help. But the
Right.
fact that they don't have any solution to this mystery is what makes me think of the Lighthouse.
Sure.
Like this idea of you almost expect at the end of the film like a ship with normal people to arrive there and just
Normal
find
people.
this madness that's happened. And there was a film recently made starring Gerald Butler called The Vanishing, which is
Hmm.
kind of based on the same urban legend, and it's okay. It's not great, but it does sort of give a theory to it and explanation as to why. But yeah, it's just one of those weird stories like the Mary Celeste. This idea of people just vanishing into nothing. Where did they go?
It's
So
stories like that that like just kind of remind you that like real life is just as creepy as anything in movies. You
right,
know?
I know,
Yeah.
no, and
Yeah.
that
That history is scary.
history freaks me out more than the lighthouse. It's just disturbing. But yeah, I just thought I would want you know bring that up because I think it's when I was younger I had this book of like strange mysteries, and that was one of them that I read, and I was like, oh my god, wow, what happened to it? And of course, like everybody's like, is it sea monsters or
Yeah.
aliens? But yeah, for I just wanted to make listeners aware of it. So
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I did hear that there were some like, some of those kind of stories that maybe were somewhat of a basis of what this movie was going to be about. And I'm sure that stuff like that definitely crept into his, research. For someone like Robert Eggers, I'm sure it's just an like insane amount of research that goes into it. He probably just reads every possible story of all these things and just finds bits and pieces and whatnot to come up with something like this.
yeah, that's what I love about him as a filmmaker is that
Yeah.
yeah, he like I said with Kubrick, like the level of research and this idea of being a perfectionist is like
Yeah.
so impressive to me, but I just couldn't do that.
That's why I'm really excited about his next one because he said in an interview that, assuming that Viking movie gets made, I mean, it is like a straight up revenge movie, I believe he said, and so the idea of his level of planning and production, but with something with a little bit more of a plot, maybe, I'm like really excited to see what that's gonna
Yeah,
turn
my
out like,
gosh. Yeah.
you
That
know.
yeah, that'd be a good one to do an episode on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm gonna go with a little bit of a silly puzzle piece here, but that is the Will Ferrell and John C. Riley comedy Step Brothers. Because I just love the idea of these two guys who are kind of they find themselves stuck together and they hate each other, but then they kind of get to love each other, but then they hate each other again, and they love each other again, and they hate each other again, and they're just kind of juvenile in the way they get on each other's nerves the whole time and drive each other nuts, and I mean it's obviously very a silly piece, you know, compared to all the Bergman and all that kind of stuff. But I think it works.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it does. I was just starting to think of their song they sing. Was it Boats and Hoes?
Boats and Hoes, yeah, that fits this very well. I want to see a mashup.
Oh my god, yeah. There is definitely that weird, gross out lad humor to
Oh
both
yeah,
both films. Like, I'm
absolutely.
just thinking in Step Brothers, doesn't he like rub his like genitals on his drums or
On his
something?
drums, yep, yep.
There's stuff that like in the Lighthouse, which is very like disgusting as well. Like when he, I would laugh so hard when he goes to throw out the chamber pot and
Oh
the
my
poo
god.
just flies back in his face.
Oh, and he lets out a scream, which I think any of us would. That scream is great. And then all the farting, of course.
Oh
I mean,
god, the
I
farting.
was actually thinking there may be more farting in this than Swiss Army Man, which was billed as the A24 movie with just nothing but farts. But I think
That
there was actually more farts in this.
that was one of my puzzle pieces. A Swiss
Nice.
Army man.
Why
Just
don't you go with that one next then
oh
for sure?
yeah. Just a farting. Yeah, it's just so much farting. I love how in the Lighthouse, like Dafoe's character doesn't apologize at any point for the farting. Like,
Absolutely.
it doesn't even sort of register that he's done it. It's just
Hmm.
like happens, and I just thought of Swiss Army Man. I mean, I love that film so much. I know that it's one of those films that you either love it or you hate it, and I think The Lighthouse is one of those movies that you're even gonna love this and go, just realize how crazy it is and just accept it, or you're gonna
Hmm.
loathe it. And
Well, it was my favorite movie of 2016, so I
ah,
loved it.
nice. It's so
Yeah.
good, isn't it? Yeah, Swiss Army Man again is that sort of dynamic between two people on screen for the majority of the runtime as well,
Hmm.
and their relationship that evolves and it is very tender. And there are tender moments in Lighthouse as well, like when they're slow dancing with each other.
Uh-huh.
It's so beautiful. And it's just like, oh, it's like that bromance going on.
He's
Uh,
so hurt that Robert Pattinson doesn't like his cooking that he
it's so-
launches into that just tirade. I mean, it's amazing. It's so
Oh,
sweet.
I love it. I love it. It's like, you like my lobster. Tell me you like my lobster.
I
But
like also, I mean, it doesn't really relate to Swiss Army Man necessarily, but I also like, as far as the farts are concerned, I like the idea of it just being a kind of, another level of his kind of seniority over him. Like his,
mm,
like, I'm not even going to address whether or not you like this. I'm just going to fart, you
like
know?
a psychological
Yeah.
warfare going on there. It's like, yeah, you're just gonna have to put up with it. And
I love that. I love that we got to talk about Swiss Army Man
I
on this.
know, I love that film so much. I think it's one of those underrated movies that was possibly not sold right.
Sure.
And as a yeah, it's like you just have to accept that film for what it is, and it's very um such an interesting take on mental illness and depression. I think the same with The
Hmm.
Lighthouse is that underneath all the farting and the weird horror is a very interesting story about mental breakdown
Hmm.
and depression and also guilt. And
Sure.
it's a very serious movie if you look at it, but you know it it's also a silly movie as well, which includes fart jokes and shit being thrown in people's faces. So
Hmm. amongst other things as well.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. Oh God. Oh God. Yeah.
Well, I will go ahead with another one. So this is kind of a weird one for me because I know that what I'm really talking about is something else. However, I don't have specific movie titles, so I'm going with kind of a little bit of a basic bitch puzzle piece right here. But it's I'm gonna go with the training scene in Kill Bill Volume 2, where Beatrix's master is like just being so mean to her and just putting her through like rigorous, torturous training, which of course is taken from all kinds of like Shaolin, those kind of martial arts movies that Quentin Tarantino loves so much. And I just don't have specific names. That's why I'm not pointing to those exactly. But there's a similar dynamic here in the Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe, just being so unnecessarily mean to Robert Pattinson for a lot of it, and just like really just making him do just the most menial tasks and disgusting work, and just not even letting up for a second as to like, I'm not going to go easy on you at all, and you are going to thank me for it, and just really being tough on him the whole time. And so it reminded me of that whole segment in Kill Bill Volume 2.
Yeah, yeah, he really like the stuff he makes him do. I feel so sorry for um Robert Pattinson's character. It just yeah. It's that brutalness, and it's kind of like he knows that he's in charge and he's exploiting that. Like,
Yes.
oh, that's a yeah, that's I get what you're saying. That's a very good piece. A very good
Awesome.
piece. I didn't think of that.
Awesome. Right
So
on.
I like it. I love it. I love it.
Beautiful.
So talking about islands and strange goings on, I want to go on to discuss Martin Scorsese's 2010 film Shutter Island.
That was on my list too.
Ah, yes. See, great minds think alike.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's the whole idea of what is real and what isn't real,
Mhm.
and this sort of the fact that it's on an island and you're isolated, and this weird past, this dark secret coming out and
Mhm.
haunting the main character. And yeah, I think Shutter Island is one of Martin Scorsese's most underrated films.
Yeah.
It's so good, and I think it kind of was cursed with the same release date as Inception, and they both got
Mm.
like a bit of a twist to them. They're both kind of dreamy in that respect, and I think like Shutter Island kind of got forgotten about really.
It does seem that way. I joked on Twitter at one point about when people are kind of talking shit lately about Scorsese and saying all he does is mob movies. I was like, oh yeah, Shutter Island, such a mob movie. It definitely. But yeah, people don't really look back on it as fondly as I think they should. I mean, obviously, great performance in there, and also, I mean, a lot of the movies we've been talking about, they do bring up that question of, what is real and what isn't. And I just appreciate that so much when a movie, and it's not doing it in a cheap way, but in a way that genuinely, there's so much to think about and so much to interpret and think about, like who, what is real, what isn't, like who is crazy, who isn't. It's really great when a movie can be that meaty and there's so much to dig into.
Yeah, there's one moment that I watched a video about it actually, about how clever Shutter Island is when he's interrogating a woman, and in one shot she looks like she's drinking from a glass, and then you cut back and she's just holding her hand like she's holding a glass,
Mm.
and you could be like, oh, that's just bad editing, but it's actually deliberate, and it's like questioning your sanity. Like, did she have a glass at all? Am I just imagining that? Kind of like with Psycho,
That's
where
wild.
it's like, do you actually see the knife going into the person or not? It's just how clever the editing is, and that's what yeah, that's the level that of attention and craftsmanship from Martin Scorsese. I mean, yeah, he's known for his mob movies. I mean, but that's so I just don't get it because he's done so many other great movies that have nothing to do with gangsters, you know,
Absolutely.
like Silence and like Hugo and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and all those movies that I think get forgotten about. So yeah, Shutter Island is one of those movies that really, yeah, needs more love.
Yeah, for sure. It's a total aside. It has nothing to do with the Lighthouse, but Hugo is a movie I always myself forget about, and I love that movie so much.
Yeah,
I
it's
just think
so
it's such a
good.
good, yeah, celebration of film and cinema. I mean, it's awesome.
Well, you can say that The Lighthouse is also a celebration of cinema.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right on. Well, okay. I only have one more puzzle piece because I did have Shutter Island on my list, but my last one is kind of one of those pieces that it's definitely too new to truly, I think, have been an inspiration, but I do see a parallel in a way. And that is actually Ari Aster's Midsummer,
Oh.
which I find it interesting that these two filmmakers, both A24, films. They had these huge hit debuts with a horror film, and followed it up with something that is both similar, like in the same vein, like horror related, but also just so much more funny than the previous films.
Mm.
And I just thought there was an interesting parallel there for these two filmmakers, because Midsummer, I mean, as disturbing and creepy as it all is, it's also like incredibly funny. Like there's a lot of real like funny moments in that movie, and I the same for The Lighthouse. I mean, there's not that much to laugh about during The Witch, but during The Lighthouse, I found myself laughing quite a lot. Even though it is just incredibly disturbing at times, incredibly bleak. But there's still, so much more of a, it's hard to even call it a lightened mood because of it's still so freaking disturbing. But it's still there's a lot more to laugh at. It's much more veers into dark comedy with both of these filmmakers with their sophomore efforts.
Yeah, and I think you were saying about the comedy in Midsummer. I just remember was it when they have the bear in a cage?
Uh huh.
It's just what was that like? It's like what is it? It's a bear in a cage, you know? It's
Yep.
just
Is anybody going to talk about that bear?
so crazy. And again is a film that is such an interesting one to follow up, like, Hereditary with. You would almost it's like with Eggers, you think, well, is he going to stick with something like The Witch, that type of theme, that type of
Mm-hmm.
look, and then he does something completely different, and
Yeah.
it's so good, and both of those movies are, yeah, like, uh, uh, just unlike anything else that's come out this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to the Big Picture podcast, and the host asked Robert Eggers. It was an interview with Eggers, and the host brought up about how between the Witch and the Lighthouse, how sonically they're like kind of like complete opposites. With the Witch being such a quiet movie, and and the Lighthouse just being like a constant barrage of sound. And I just found that so interesting. It really, really is like, and doing that though within that same almost similar style though, because it's still, so squarely set in a specific time frame and such attention to detail and production design and all that stuff. So it's similar but then completely different.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that both directors don't play it safe, and they
Mhm.
they try something completely different, but they still sort of keep to the horror theme.
Yeah.
uh and yeah, like, the this interesting movies in terms of what they're talking about, like the topics they're talking about, like depression and grief, and um the relationship as well, like. You
Yeah.
happen to talk about Defoe's character like gaslighting and being,
Yeah.
the same happens in Midsummer, with
Sure.
the main character's boyfriend sort of gaslighting her and making her question her own sanity and
Totally.
reality. And yeah, they're both such great movies.
Oh
But
yeah.
uh, I think it'll be really messed up to watch them both
Oh my
one
God.
after each other. You're just gonna like descend into madness.
A24 is out to make us all go crazy this year.
Yeah.
Plus with Climax.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, Climax. Wow. And High Life. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. What's going on this year? Is it like
I know.
cinema just like wants us all to question our own reality? It's crazy. I mean,
I think that's what's happening.
yeah, it's great. I love it. Love it.
I love it too. So what do you got next? Do you have any more puzzle pieces?
I have, and I'm going to I'm going to do some more film history related picks. And first one I'm going to go with is the 1929 surreal film from Louis Bonnell and Salvador Dali, and it's Un chien andalou. Um, it's pretty famous. It's been referenced so many times in various different cinematic pieces. Even The Simpsons have a reference to it. It's the
Hmm.
famous film where you see a woman's eye being cut with a knife with a blade,
Mm.
and you have the imagery of a man's hand turning into ants. it, there is no plot to it. The movie is based on dreams, and a fun little fact: Robert Pattinson actually starred as Darlie in a film called Little Ashes.
I've never
So
seen that one. Yeah.
no, I haven't actually seen it either, which is, as a Robert Pattinson fan, I feel like I should have done. But I will catch up with all of his work.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that's one of the films. I also have the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920, which is the famous German film, the Gothic horror, which again has this idea of heightened reality, doesn't really exist in a particular type of time,
Hmm.
um, and then plays on the use of tight angles and camera shots, and um, the main villain of the movie is this sort of hypnotized monster called Caesar, who's wide-eyed and like manic, and is completely uh robotic in how he walks and moves. And I think
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of that with Robert Pattinson's character in The Lighthouse. Is this almost like he's under some sort of hypnotic spell and is
Sure.
like shell shocked as well and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is how these German expressionistic movies came about. Was they saw men returning from the front lines of during the First World War, and they didn't know what post-traumatic stress disorder was, and a lot of the men kind of look like how Caesar is in Dr. Caligari, is
Hmm.
this shell-shocked, a wide-eyed, slow-moving man who doesn't connect to reality. And I think that's what we see with The Lighthouse again, is this idea of this the haunted being haunted by your past, and how that
Sure.
bleeds into your contemporary everyday. So those are two films, and my last one again is another old film from the 1920s.
Hmm.
Not Savertu. Which
Mm-mm.
fun fact, Defoe played Max Sherrock in Shadow the Vampire. So
I
do you,
love that movie. So
yeah.
good.
uh, so yeah, I just thought I would put those both in. But again, that is another movie that uses the heightened sense of reality and jarring camera angles to put the viewer on this, like, gets under their skin and
Yeah,
gets you sort of like um really in this weird, like, it's all about the atmosphere of the movie and this heightened reality and not knowing what is real and what's like a dream. And um yeah, again, is so ahead of its time. I mean, all of those movies are ahead of its time, and I feel like The Lighthouse is ahead of its time.
right.
It's so unlike anything that we have now. I mean, we've obviously spoken about puzzle pieces, but it's really hard to find puzzle pieces for this film.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, like I said at the beginning, that was part of the reason I knew that you would make for a good co-host on this one, because I know you know a lot of those movies that are much earlier that I, just haven't, exposed myself to. But yeah, as far as contemporary though, I mean, there's really not much that has come out lately. I mean, I even just like that that setting or
Mm,
that style or any of it really, nothing happening in this is stuff that really happens that much recently.
yeah, and I think that's what I like about Eggers, is that he clearly has studied film and,
Yeah.
knows about, Bergman and all these, David Lynch and all these films from the 1920s, and has managed to incorporate them into his film.
Hmm.
And I hope that will give people it will help, a whole new generation go back and discover these old movies, because you can, it's great to see how these films have influenced not just Eggers but many directors. Just go watch something like Beetlejuice, any Tim Burton movie, and then go watch, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and then
Right.
come back to me and say, like, Burton clearly, wasn't influenced by those films, because he was. I mean,
Of course.
you have
Yeah.
that's what's kind of wonderful about studying is film, is seeing how it all sort of bleeds into the movies that we have now. Is that everything, especially with silent cinema, we forget how revolutionary those films are and what they do. I mean, yeah,
Sure.
that's why, the conscious decision to have the lighthouse shot in black and white and in that ratio,
Yeah.
is sort of referencing those old movies.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, right on. Why don't I go ahead and do the finished puzzle, and then we'll get into any further closing thoughts we have. The finished puzzle includes Hour of the Wolf, The Shining, Persona, There Will Be Blood, Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Last Crusade, The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery, Step Brothers, Swiss Army Man, Kill Bill Volume 2, Shutter Island, Midsummer, Un Chien Andalou, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and Nosferatu. Uh, a long, long history of movies. I mean, from recent stuff to very, very old. But yeah, a lot of madness happening throughout these, but then also a lot of other kind of influences along the way. One question I also wanted to ask you, this movie is so like stinkingly male, and having you as a co-host being a woman, I mean, it's just curious your thoughts on that, just how much male energy is in this, and not to have really barely anything female in this movie aside from the mermaid, really.
I, you know what? I wonder whether men are actually like this. Do you like?
Yeah, that's a good question.
um, I I think it's such an interesting film because it really, yeah, it's this idea of, toxic masculinity gone wild. You know,
Uh-huh.
this idea that they almost want to outdo themselves, like peacocks or something. You know, showing off to each other like how gross the other one can be. You know,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
I I just love it. I find it such an interesting film about what is saying and this, you know, the power dynamics and yeah, they just seems like they just need this companionship, and all they have is each other, and how that must, yeah, this. I just think of that mermaid, like, oh my God,
It's
that
crazy.
we didn't even talk about the mermaid. I mean,
I know.
she's really something.
Oh, yeah, that's I think that kind of sums up the mermaid. She is something.
Oh God, and just that weird love making scene between, like, oh, the oh.
Oh boy. I gotta say, as far we're obviously Robert Pattinson fans here, the both of us,
Yes.
and I gotta say, not only the talent that this guy has, and but the choices, the roles that he is picking, and this career that he's building for himself. I mean, it is just wild the things that he is getting to do, and I got to imagine for someone to have this range and this just this talent level, he must himself be inspired by a lot of these classic weird
Mm.
films, and so he must like just really be loving getting to do these kind of projects.
I mean, yeah, he's such a great actor. I feel like, but just because he happened to star in those Twilight movies, that
Uh-huh.
you know, the same with Kristen Stewart. She's a great actress. You know,
Sure, absolutely.
just because they happen to star in those movies doesn't define them. You know,
Yes.
it because Robert Pattinson, oh my God, he's in so many great movies. I just think, you know, we had High Life. You know, he's been in Good Time. He's been in Maps to the Stars. I mean,
Lost City of Z.
oh my God, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see what he does with Batman. Like,
I know. It's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, it's obviously we're getting back into, the studio world, the big, big blockbuster world. But I mean, I think he's going to really, do something interesting with it. I don't think he would have taken it otherwise.
yeah, I'm sad to see Batfleck go. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I liked him.
Yeah, it's a shame, but I'm excited to see like this different, maybe darker, grittier version. I know, like dark and gritty goes with Batman. You know,
Sure.
like baked beans and farting, but you know.
Yeah. Now that is a metaphor. I like
Thanks.
it.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and I think his decisions on what roles he takes, he really, you know, doesn't just take anything. I feel like he puts a lot of thought in, and also Dafoe. I mean, can he just someone give him an Oscar already? Like, what else
It's
does he need to
crazy.
do?
I know. I still can't believe he didn't get for the Florida project.
Oh
I
my God,
mean, it,
biggest snub ever.
uh, yeah, it really is. I mean, it was he in that movie is just the most natural like thing I have seen like
So
probably
good,
this
so
decade. I
good.
mean, so damn good.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh man. Well, this was great talking about this movie. B, how's things going with you and your new podcast and your new site and all that?
Yeah, so it's called In Their Own League, and it's going really well. It's you know, obviously devoted to women in film and discussing anything to do with female filmmakers, female characters, female representation on screen. And we're about to launch next month our top 50 films of the decade.
Nice.
And yeah, it's going to be a very interesting list. There's going to be some movies on there which I think people aren't necessarily going to expect. There may be a Robert Pattinson movie or two on there. You know, he did star in High Life, which was directed by a woman.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's definitely got, like, you know, I not enough male actors are you know, teaming up with female filmmakers, but he is one of
Sure.
them. So he's yeah, so that's really great, and I'm excited to see what happens next. Really, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work, and our
Yeah.
our podcast is launching next month as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Beautiful. Right on. And I just realized I forgot to ask you before that. What's another movie you've seen recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Oh, good. So I watched recently the Ken Loach movie, Sorry We Missed You. If anyone has been on Twitter, they probably have seen him saying stuff about Marvel movies. But trust me, like, don't go and he's a really great filmmaker, and what he does and how he talks about films to do with the British working class is so interesting, and it's such a great movie. It's very slow, but it's very real. The actors are all non-trained actors, and it's about
Mm.
a man who works for a company kind of like Amazon, where he's a self-employed delivery driver who works on a 0-hour contract, and he works himself into exhaustion because if he doesn't work, if he doesn't deliver, he gets penalties, and his family life sort of breaks down around him. So it's a very serious movie, but there are moments of comedy in it, and it's a great film which I hope more people go and see, and it will be releasing next week, I believe.
All right, great. Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. So hopefully it's opening here at the same time, and hopefully I'll be able to check it out.
Yeah, I would just bring some tissues with you if you're gonna go watch it,
Okay.
because I was crying by the end of it. I was just like, but yeah, I cry at so many films.
Nice. Yeah, you got to bring tissues for a different reason for Robert Pattinson movies. Well, right on, B. It was great having you here again. Good luck with the new podcast, and hopefully we'll have you back on again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, and you do such great work, and I love just talking to you about movies. And really, just it's so good, so good.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vern, and I'm the host of the Cinema Recall podcast, part of That Moment In. We are slightly different than your average movie podcast in that we don't review a whole feature. Instead, myself and a guest will break down our favorite scenes in movies and then discuss why they are so iconic. So check us out. We are available on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and more. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Cinema Recall Podcast, and we are available on Twitter at Cinema_Recall. We hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. It was a lot of fun to talk about, and I am hoping to go back and see it again, if not tonight, definitely this week sometime, because this movie, oh my God, it's so good. I actually, this is one of those movies that really grows with you. When I walked out of the theater, I was like, I mean, I loved it, but I don't know exactly how much I loved it, but I just can't stop thinking about it, and it's definitely one of those movies. If you haven't seen it, go see it. There's really no way that anything we talked about could truly spoil it for you because it's an experience, so I definitely highly recommend it. And I just want to say, we're kicking off November with this one, and October was probably, not counting the month where the Midsummer episode just went completely viral, insane. I don't even know how it happened, but October was our biggest month other than that. And I want to thank you all who have been listening to the show. We keep getting new listeners, new people getting in touch with us. We got a whole bunch of new co-hosts coming up for you guys. It's just been awesome, the growth of this show, and I really appreciate everybody who's been out there listening. I want to keep making the show better, so, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, or just get in touch with me and let me know how you're enjoying the show, what we could do to make it better. I love doing it, and I want to keep putting out great shows for you guys. Of course, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of the big podcast apps, and follow us on social media at PiecingPod. And join the Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue talking about all these movies. And we also have our Patreon, which I am starting to record a whole bunch of new content for. Right now, there's a unreleased episode on Jay and Silent Bob Reboot up there in the Patreon, which you'll get if you become a patron of our Patreon. Is that what it's called? But if you do that, you'll get early access to that, which the episode won't be coming out until it hits VOD, so that could be a little while. I'm not sure when that's going to be. So go check that out, and we're recording some special episodes that will be exclusive to the Patreon. Those are going to be coming real soon, too. So, as we always do with piecing it together, I'm going to leave you with a piece of my music. I think a good one for a movie like The Lighthouse and the storms and all that stuff would be this track called An Unseen Sky, which, of course, was the title track for my album, my second album, An Unseen Sky. So enjoy this song, and we will be back with more Piecing It Together next week.
And all points west.